Okay, we're live. All right, thank you everyone for joining us today. You're watching Stand Up Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. I'm Margot Paez. I'm one of your co-hosts on the show. I'm a scientist, engineer, and occasional journalist. And over here, that's Carlos Marroquin, your other co-host on the show. And we have a special guest and maybe a regular with us going forward. We'll
Yeah.
see how she likes doing this with us today. And so I'm going to go ahead and introduce her. This is Jacqueline Hernandez. She was born and raised in LA County, Los Angeles County. Her political involvement focuses on health justice and equity. She is a health researcher, public health educator, and an advocate for human rights. She has a bachelor's in psychology and a master's in sociology from Cal State University Dominguez Hills, and her master's is in public health. In public health and community health education from CISA and from Northridge, Cal State Northridge. She is involved with efforts for single-payer healthcare, environmental justice, reproductive health, and supports systemic changes in public policy to improve health. So thank you, Jackie, for joining us today. Carlos, before we get into it, would you like to give another more personal introduction to Jackie?
Yes. So we are so honored to have Jackie with us tonight. I can tell you one thing that she's one of those young people that are rising within the progressive movement. She's a voice that is well respected amongst our peers here in Southern California. I've been watching her for a while actually, and I've been watching her involvement on the movement on the issues, particularly healthcare for all, really developing, and I've been listening to her, and she's got it. She's got the issues right on target. She understands it. She's very clear, and you're gonna be able to hear from her directly when it comes down to these issues that we all care about. It is really important for us to elevate the voices of our young people. She's one of our youth. I consider her one of our leaders here in Southern California. And it is an honor for us to have her to join the team here at Stand Up Fight Back. What we try to do is bring you not only the latest on the news, but regarding how the movement is developing and the next steps that we need to take forward. So I think that having her on the team will only add to that voice, will only articulate, in a better way amongst young people, because she does connect to the young people. But don't be surprised. She's full of surprises. Don't be surprised that we are going to see her really become one of those strong voices here in Southern California, in California particular, throughout California, because she's known throughout California. So it is a pleasure. It is an honor to have her with us, to joining the team here at Stand Up Fight Back. Jackie?
Thank you so much, Carlos. Honestly, I'm very honored to hear those words. First of all, I've been pretty much in this fight ever since 2016 when Bernie did start running. I started to understand the political issues and what it meant for pretty much the career choices I was also making. And I was planning to be like a mental health therapist. And then I saw the systemic issues that bring us in therapy, right? So throughout my career, I've been tackling those health issues, eventually understanding that we have a lot of work to do and we cannot do any work in public health really the way we're supposed to without making systemic changes. And I'm really happy to be here to talk about that with you all, because I think those are the important connections we need to make. Health policy and how health issues really have everything to do with every aspect of our way of life. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
Yes, thank you.
Awesome. That's great. Thank you, Jackie, for joining us. All right. So, Carlos, before we get into the main topic, maybe we should talk a little bit about what's been going on lately. I know you wanted to touch on the whole situation with Donald Trump and Mar-a-Lago and all of that scandal. So I will let you go ahead and rant if you'd like.
Well, it's something that the whole country is looking at, and you know, it does affect the political world because we are involved in the political world. The issues that we care about, involves all this. It is important for us to know where we stand as a progressive movement and what we should be looking at. Because at the end of the day, we know that this is all a show for these people because they have never had the interest of the American people. They have never really uh, taken care of the issues that are really bugging down the people. Like, for example, education, healthcare, the environment, so on and so forth. Right now, we see some traction with a Democratic Party, but it's not enough. It's not enough. They kind of half stepping, but we got to give it to them. They're doing something, and again, we're gonna make very clear they're not doing enough. A lot more has to be done. These are baby steps they're taking. But in the meantime, we have this individual, Donald Trump. Oh my God, what a disaster! We're talking about, all the people that he gets involved with are under investigation. His key players, his key uh, personnel that surrounds him has ended up in prison. Now we have the number two guy, his chief financial officer for his organization, pretty much saying that, they're guilty of tax fraud. And the list goes on and on and on. And we saw the elections on some of the states, the influence that he still has among Republicans. It's mind-boggling when you see how much people so blindly follow him. When he has really nothing to offer. He's divided the country. He has not done anything, to lift our communities. Yes, there's right now we have a different president, but let us remind you that under his watch, we had people struggling as never seen before. We saw more people falling into homelessness. We saw more people falling into deep poverty. We saw how he disregarded the COVID-19 crisis, and the list goes on and on. Why would people still be paying attention to this man? When he's being caught with super secret documents, at his home, where anybody could have access to that. It is mind-boggling for anyone to still defend this man. So, but having said all that, we need to stay focused. Progressives, we need to continue to do what we're doing. We need to continue to support those people that are running for office. We got to continue to fight for the issues because that's what we are good at. That's what we are going to be seeing a lot of traction among some of our peers that are deciding to run for office. We got to continue to be paying attention. We cannot shy away. We got to understand that this is a critical time for climate change, and we got to continue to organize and do everything that we can.
Yeah, absolutely, Carlos. Yeah, it's very challenging times right now, and Donald Trump is partly making that a little more challenging. I was very surprised when the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago, and then he had all these supporters come out, and they were still, after all that, really, really strongly supporting him. And they had the Trump flags and all of that. That really, really surprised me. I guess I thought maybe people would kind of calm down. They would, not be as enthusiastic about him, but that is not the case. And then there was that person that went into an FBI building and was trying to shoot some of the FBI agents, and all in the name of Donald Trump, I guess. So, yeah, there's a very scary undertone to all of that that's going on as we go into the midterms, and then later on, I think Donald Trump plans to run for president again. Whether he's indicted or not, I think he is still going to try to run. Of course, the Republicans are also promoting another person in the party, Ron DeSantis. He's over in Texas. He's scary too.
He's in Florida. Yeah.
Oh, in Florida. Sorry.
Yes.
He's the governor of Florida. Sorry. Yeah, they're both got their own scary things going on. Yeah, Governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis, is basically trying to rule as an authoritarian by decree, and he's not much better than Donald Trump. So the two options right now in the Republican Party for presidential candidates are both scary in their own way. So going into 2024 and seeing how that election cycle plays out in the next year is going to be, I think, I don't want to say exciting because I think it's going to be more terrifying than that. So we'll see what happens. And climate change is still, of course, one of the most, I personally think, the most important issue, the most important umbrella issue, because it touches on all aspects of society, from inequality to health to the economy, our food systems. All of that is touched by climate change. And unfortunately, people don't quite get that yet, but hopefully they will soon, because if not, they will have no choice, because it's going to get worse before anything gets better. So, yeah, Jackie, do you want to chime in at all?
Well, I mean, when we talk about the Donald Trump issue, I have to say I'm really into looking and reading into like cultish stuff. So I really was looking into how like some documentaries and whatnot on like white supremacy and like the ideology that is behind this whole Donald Trump obsession, and why they're just not gonna budge. They're not thinking in the same world that we are, quite frankly. So they're definitely in some type of cult. There's very group thinking to the point that they really don't see the issues like we do. So if anything, knowing that Donald Trump was trying to get involved in some way, that he did want to be part of the insurrection, that he wanted to be able to pretty much take over the government, like that, I think that gives him more fuel to his followers to be like, yes, that's the man that we're fighting for. Like, he didn't give up, we shouldn't give up either. And quite honestly, the whole situation of how when he took power, things have gotten worse in the sense of voter suppression. We're going to be seeing more right-wing pressure in the polls, which is pretty scary, because we also saw DeSantis trying to have like a voter police or something like that we have seen. And he's really just, the Republicans are really going to depend on voter suppression to really take away and a lot of the votes, and to ensure that they have some of those checking systems in play to be able to that way to really eliminate a lot of the votes. Because I was reading this book, it's called One Person No Vote by Carol Anderson. And quite honestly, this issue of white supremacy has been going on for a while. Like this is their opportunity to really take power through the voting polls, and also to ensure that they have all the systems in place to actually do an insurrection. So in my opinion, they're really, really trying to get this momentum going, and they're going to try to actually take over the government. I really do feel like the evidence is there. We see that through all the policies that they have been doing, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. So with all of those paperworks that they're going to be finding, and I hope they do, all of their plans are really going to be there, because a lot of the friends, try to get a pardon before he was going to move away from office. So we know that there is guilt there, and we know that there's going to be some grand revelation, I would say. But it's just funny because, he took all that stuff, from the White House to his office, to his personal office. And yet, I'm not a fan of Hillary, but everyone was talking about her emails. And I'm here like wondering, like, okay, y'all had a problem with her emails, which it would be a problem if there was something there. But how come these papers are not that much of an issue to you guys? Because they have an agenda, and it's a white supremacist agenda. And they're really trying to get this through. And we are going to be seeing that state by state. We're seeing that with book bans. We're seeing that with all of these new laws, like I said, that are suppressing people's rights. So eventually, at one point, people are going to have to need to move from their state, which is super hard to do. or really people are going to have to fight back and organize and really try to win over and show up to vote. They're going to have to vote Democrat to be able to at least balance that fascism that's sweeping through. So I think like at this point in time, we have to really organize and understand that there is still hope. We see this with Kansas. We see this with a lot of different states that are really showing up to defend their rights. So I think at this point, when we see these issues with Donald Trump, this is a symptom. There's a huge issue that's in play, and that's what we have to focus on. So I think organizing is a way we're going to be able to fight back.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think the other scary thing of what they've been playing on is not just white supremacy, but also on transgender issues, this bigotry. It's very scary because they're literally trying to erase an entire group of people right now, under the guise of protecting children. And it's just so dangerous because they're getting their supporters really upset about this and getting them to basically turn against an entire group of people. And if it, under the right conditions, this can lead to horrible violence against innocent people who are just trying to be who they are. So that's one of the things that really worries me, because we are effectively in what a scholar of fascism calls legal fascism. That's Jason Stanley. And because of that, we are really in that moment of where all we need is a fascist to come into the highest office in the country.
DeSantis, by the way, I would say that's a guy. He's the one that just said recently, stop wokeism. And I'm like, what? You don't even know what it is. But anyway, continue, because you're on the right track with DeSantis, to be honest. Yeah.
I've been telling people DeSantis is worse than Trump. It's like people are, the Democratic Party is so focused on Trump. This is like the third time they impeach him, basically. This is not really an impeachment, but it is like, it is impeachment theater in the same way that they've done it twice while Trump was in office. And the Democratic Party is so focused on this. And, part of it is that they really want to win the midterms. I'm hoping that they want to win, I don't know. But right. So like they've impeached him for the third time. And it's all about getting rid of Trump. He's so terrible. The January 6th, they try to take over this coup d'etat that failed or whatever. And they're completely ignoring this other guy who is very tasteful, to the rich, the elite, the club. He's part of the club. He doesn't say crazy things. Like Trump, crazy things.
He doesn't say crazy things. He does them.
I was like, he does say crazy things, but this guy's
crazy. Trump says crazy things. DeSantis does crazy, hateful things, and he's not afraid. And the thing is, he knows how to use power to do it, whereas Trump really didn't know. Trump's basically a gangster who came into the White House and tried to run it like he ran his gangster corporations in New York, and that didn't really work out for him. You can't really play the politics in that same way at that level. But DeSantis, he absolutely knows how. He went to Yale, so he's part of that boys club, that Yale rich elite club. Right. So he knows how to work that particular network and be that type of politician and speak that language. And he can do it in a way that is acceptable verbally, and still basically, do like a genocide of trans people or something like that. Right. So that's why I find him way scarier. And I'm hoping that there is enough division within the Republican Party that a Trump and DeSantis run splits them enough that maybe neither of them can take the majority of the electoral college come 2024. But I don't know. I don't know yet. We'll find out. The DeSantis has to appeal to the Trump voters as well. He has to capture them somehow. And I don't quite know how he pulls with them, but he is definitely the person to come in and be that fascist,
Well,
like you're saying, Jackie.
right. Sufficient to say he's been campaigning throughout the United States. That's what he's doing right now. He was campaigning in Arizona. He's been to literally every major political event, Republican event that they have had. They had him as one of the speakers, and he's being very welcome by the people. So we saw what he's doing in Florida. We saw how he literally went after one of the district attorneys because, again, he said that he wasn't going to enforce certain part of the law when it came down to abortion, I believe it was, and he pretty much impeached them on his own. A one-man thing. He's like disregarded the voters that voted this other guy in, this Democrat.
Yeah.
But he's, systematically doing the things, doing the agenda of the Republican Party. Again, what we have in place right now is massive chaos. But in the midst of chaos, we need to be paying attention because this is how they operate. This is their MO for the Republican Party, and then they just push themselves through. And I like what Jackie says. Like they're putting everything in place, so all they have to literally do is execute. They pass on just like they did with abortion. All the states had everything set up, everything lined up. So the minute the rule of abortion, what did the states do? They just push their agenda in each state, right?
Yeah, this is the reason why the John Lewis Act didn't pass, because they already knew that if that passed, each state would lose the ability to enforce their own voter suppression laws that they had passed. So that's the reason why a lot of them were not going to pass it. Like, we need to just realize that we don't have the majority in the Senate. We don't have the majority of Democrats really that have the progressive agenda also in mind, and they want to change the party system too, because that's another thing we have to think about. Because at the end of the day, when we don't have enough people in the Senate as well to pass these laws, like, the Democrats also like to play their games when it comes to gerrymandering within localities. So we have to realize that too, that when we vote for Democrats, they have to be progressive. They cannot be the centrist, because we will lose over and over, as we've seen. So that's kind of one of those things that we need to figure out too. Like, these voter suppression laws, as you mentioned, Carlos, all of these laws are already kind of in the states, just waiting for some of these laws to either not pass nationally and federally, or the Supreme Court at this point to undo some of the progress that's made. So that's kind of how I'm seeing it too. A lot of these laws are not going to pass because states know that they have certain perks within their own jurisdictions that they can enforce without the federal government coming in. So,
right. So the other topic that we wanted to talk about, because it's happening everywhere, it's happening in Europe, it's happening here throughout the United States, the climate change situation. We saw how rivers are literally drying up over in Europe. I know the Rhine River. I mean, I was in Germany, and I remember the beauty of that river, where the splendor was how vast it was, and you literally had this big ships go through there, and now it's drying up. Same thing is happening here in the United States, the Colorado River drying up, and we saw that mass problems with water in multiple states, and remind you that California produces a lot of the food for not only the United States but the world. It's a major. That's how they build their major economy. But without water, there's going to be major issues. So we're talking about the environment and how both parties have neglected to protect the environment. And I got to say that both parties have neglected to protect the environment. they both have sided with polluters. They both have sided and protected, big corporate America that has been polluting, over the years. Both parties are behind big oil. Both parties, don't want to get away from this very corporations that are, endangering the world. So that, I think, is something that we have to keep paying attention to. Yeah, even though that right now they have taken some baby steps in the Democratic Party to throw, a few things at climate change, but it's not enough. This is very insignificant into the amount of work that they need to do. Right now, we even have Manchin acting like he's a progressive. He's calling out cinema. It's like, are you serious, dude? You know what I mean? It's a joke. These people are a joke. They are not concerned about the well-being of the people. And if we fall for all their nice little talk that they say, all their smiles, we in trouble, people. We cannot we cannot be patting the Democratic Party in the back. We got to stay on them. We got to stay on them.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a global drought, really. I mean, the Southwest has been in a mega drought for decades now, but globally, we're having a drought in places where we're breaking records in terms of how dry it is. And what happens is that, so these rivers are drying out, and that has various different effects. Like, for example, in France, there's a lot of nuclear plants that are along the river, one of the rivers that goes through there. And the water level is too low for them to be able to pump that water out, run it through the nuclear plant and cool it down and pump it back out into the river. So that means that you can't run those nuclear plants safely. And that is, that's low carbon energy that they're using, or that should be available, but it isn't available. And if that isn't available, they have to then turn to an alternative source. And it's not going to be wind and solar. They're turning to other things like natural gas or coal, even, which we're seeing in Germany, unrelated to droughts, but Germany is already trying to bring back coal plants because of the situation with Russia. So this is the problem, that is this like compounding effect because of climate change. And then the other issue is, because it's so dry, it's so hot, that even if it rains, the earth is so parched that it changes the structure of the soil so that it's much harder for it to absorb the water at first. So that water can just run right off, go right into the ocean, and doesn't get absorbed into the soil enough. And so now you have, even though you might have a lot of rainfall, you'll end up having floods, and the earth won't absorb it as quickly. So the crops end up failing, either because of the flood damage or because it's just too dry, and that causes the crops to die or to be damaged over that season. And so that becomes a compounding issue. So it's not even just that the river's too low and ships can't get through, or you can't run a nuclear plant. It's also your food system is being affected. And that's happening globally. That's happening in the UK. That's happening in France. It's happening in Germany. It's happening in other countries in Europe. It's happening in the United States. There's the negotiations going on that have been going on around the Colorado River water rights between Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, California, a few other states that are a little bit north, and Wyoming, I believe, is one of those states as well, trying to decide, how are we going to cut like 30% of our water usage so that we can still run those hydroelectric plants? Because again, if we don't have that power from the hydroelectric plants, then we're going to have to rely on natural gas and coal to make up for that. So that is the problem that we face with climate change, is that it touches on everything. And the 80% of the water use in California is for farmland, and California produces a lot of food for the rest of the country. So if there is not enough water in that region for farmland, that is going to affect the food availability of food across the country. And that means that if there is a scarcity of food all of a sudden, that prices are going to go up. So this is something that is a big risk around the world. So if you start seeing prices going up for food and various commodities, it is because climate change is affecting all of these aspects: energy, food, water. All of these are the very fundamental components of society. And inflation is going to happen as a result. So, we're struggling with inflation right now because of supply chain issues and various other things that are going on, as well as corporate gouging prices. But in particular, energy and food have been very high. So that could come down temporarily, but it could easily go back up again because of these disruptions to our food supply and our energy supply. So this is something that we have to keep in mind going into the future, because I personally don't think that we're ever going to live without inflation again. We spent our lives not worrying about inflation. Especially younger generations have never experienced inflation. I think that this 30 or 40-year period where inflation was pretty calm in the West is no longer a realistic thing, because we have unsuccessfully tackled climate change in the way that we should have. And there's been plenty of reports, scientific reports, that have said we must not allow any more new fossil fuel production, but the Inflation Reduction Act encourages more leasing for drilling for oil and natural gas. So, even though there are some good things in the Inflation Reduction Act, there is still the problem that we are not supposed to be adding on more fossil fuels, but we are doing that. So, these problems are not going to go away. They're going to get worse for a while, I think.
And the problem is this, that it trickles down to our communities. All these problems trickle down to our communities. And tonight we're going to give you an example of what's happening here in Southern California in some of our communities, because again, the irresponsible corporations that don't care about the environment, don't care about the water that people drink, don't care about the grounds that our children have to play in. So these are direct effects, besides what it's doing to the world. We have this trickles down literally all the way to our communities, believe it or not. And this is why we have to be paying attention. Jackie, you want to take us a little bit through some of the stuff that be happening here in Southern California?
Yeah, I mean, I do want to talk about also the Hoover Dam and all that, because just to revert back, and then I'll get to the specified issue. But from what I've read as well, if the Hoover Dam stops producing water, we're going to go back to fossil fuels here in California. And that's going to just be worse. From my knowledge as well, when I bring up this issue, as Margaret did, and I tell people like it's going to get worse, they're like, no, you're being so pessimistic. Stop saying that. Like, we're going to be able to plant our own gardens. And I'm like, you all don't get it. Like, even if you plant your own garden, how long will your food last you? A week, too? Because it's just not, we're not going to be able to have food for everybody. I think that's kind of my main concern as well. I'm not trying to be pessimistic. I'm trying to understand things from like how scientists are telling us these things are happening. And I'm just trying to understand how it is that we can actually make these changes at a policy level, because that's where it's going to be at. That's where it's going to trickle down to all of this. And, when we don't have that food supply, I can't imagine if people right now are saying it's going so bad with the prices, how it's going to be when they see $10, $20 loaf of bread, or even worse. So I'm trying to just warn people, to have them understand that this is more than individual choice. This is actually policy choice. And getting into the issue now locally, this is a policy choice when we talk about pollution. Okay. especially because when I looked at COVID-19, a lot of the areas here in LA that had the worst COVID-19 illnesses and death were historically red line areas, and areas that have pollution such as oil wells and like these factories that we're going to talk about today. So here in LA, we see a lot of the pollution that's happening in communities of color. So you're going to see it in East LA, you're going to see it in the eastern side of LA County, which is right now, I'm going to get into the Exide company that polluted the soil, the water, and air in East LA, which also constitutes Lincoln Heights and East LA with Boyle Heights. So then we go also even further into East LA, and we also see Chemeco back where city industry is at. And that has affected Hacienda Heights, La Puente, and a lot of other areas surrounding there as Bocata Heights. And when we look at these issues, we see that it's companies that neglected to actually take action to prevent any leakage or any issue from happening around the area. These companies were pretty much established in the 60s, 70s, 80s. And we know that environmental racism is a thing. We know that a lot of these companies were placed there because they were like, oh, it's just, it's Mexicans and Latinos and Black people. Who cares? Like, they're not going to fight it. They're not going to fight it. They're not going to like say anything. If anything, they're going to be grateful for jobs. And this is where we also need to pay attention. Like, what jobs are they giving our people? Because a lot of the workers that been working in these areas, they also get, illnesses. And these illnesses also are not going to show up right away. They're going to show up throughout time. They're going to, show up in communities some decades later. We're going to see it even in schools. We know that lead poisoning causes intellectual disability and also a lot of other neurological functions that really impedes growth and development. So when we I even looked at the scores and kind of see the correlation. And I was like, wow, these schools are like doing 30%, from the average of, with California or whatever. And it's like, we always talk about health and education as if it's an individual person's fault, especially in these communities of color. And then we also fault their education. Oh, they're not well educated, this and that. But look at the biological harm that these companies are causing. So it affects everything. But at the same time, they're not being held accountable. They actually got away with a case here in LA. They got away with it. They don't have to pay anything, apparently. They filed bankruptcy. So how do you help the community there? Because public health is so underfunded that it's like difficult.
And just so that people know who Exide is, for example, and who Chemeco is, can you tell us a little bit about Exide, who they are?
Yeah, so Exide was. Go ahead. Do you have some of the information, Carlos?
Well, Exide was originally a brand name for batteries. Those a lot of the electric storage battery companies, the Exide Corporation, and they were well known here in Los Angeles area, the southeast area of Los Angeles. But they produce a lot of the batteries, and those batteries were leaking, and the whole structure was penetrating the earth, and it got into the water system. It got into the water system where a lot of the communities in the southeast part of Los Angeles, people were developing all kinds of illnesses, cancer, and all kinds of stuff, and they did an investigation, and they did, there were some things that happened, and there was a pushback, and then a lot of the politicians actually ignored the problems for a long time, and they went along with it, and they protected them.
And these are Democrats, by the way. These are Democrats in LA. So just taking that into consideration, as you were talking about, Carlos, that they also ignore the problem. Yeah, I mean, these are Democrats. What are they doing?
A big corporation, these were huge factories, and the water traveled all the way down to the south. And unfortunately, these are, again, communities that have very little resources to fight back. And the representatives didn't stand by the communities. And they negotiated settlements with a company after they were investigated, and they were seeing that they the damage that they created, and pretty much got away with murder. And then on top of that, they end up filing for bankruptcy. So, the area is still contaminated. There's still major problems there, and it's
It,
gonna. We don't know what it's going to take to fix the problem, but it's massive,
yeah.
massive.
It's a whole cleanup that has to happen, and even then that's difficult to do because I mean if it's in the soil, like in the groundwater, it's in, it's like what do you do then, and apart from that, in Lincoln Heights, they wanted to create housing on top of this old place that was like 1,000. They found it to be 1,000 times higher the levels of lead and arsenic and all these other issues. The community came out and they did speak out. So the community is doing its part. They're attending these issues. They're really showing up. And here in Hacienda Heights, Avocado Heights area with Cometco, by the way, they got away with a $600,000 fine. And they want to reopen. They want to continue to operate. And Ila Solis and I forgot who the other supervisor is, but two of the supervisors, the county supervisors, are against it. So we do have some of the supervisors showing up, but they just need more support. We need local politicians to really come out and understand that Cometco is not good for the community. And I also looked at the reports because all of the reports that you see for the environmental health issues or anything like that, they're public. So you can see when they do investigations and when they cite the violations and what it is that they were cited for. And from what I read, they were cited because they didn't have the proper protocols to prevent groundwater contamination. So we know this has happened in 2018. In 2020, they have been trying to file for like renewing the permit to be there. So they're trying to stay there. And a lot of advocates right now are coming out. Shout out to the Avocado Heights Vaqueros Vaqueras, because they've been doing a lot of work out there, filming, going out there, getting people to protest, just getting the community involved. And they really have been doing a lot of this work with Coalition Lenner as well, that they're trying to really come into their local community and say, no more of this. You need to pay the fine. You need to clean this up and get the hell out of here, because we don't want companies or corporations who cannot do their due part of ensuring that this is safe and then putting people over profits. I think that kind of boils down to that last straw, like people over profits. We want politicians who are going to stand up for that and who are going to ensure that companies like that can't set foot in our communities, and that the companies that come need to be green energy. They need to be ensuring that our people are also going to be safe. And that's, I think, the solution to this problem, like having politicians that are going to fight back, having the community show up, and actually getting companies and businesses that are going to come and really ensure that the whole strategy is going to be safe for people, and that's going to help the community grow. Because right now it's a mess. It's really a mess. And I'm really disappointed in politicians here in LA who are Democrats, who are not showing up to the community and who are supporting these people. There was like this little community fair. By the way, it's a community fair. And even City of Hope was there. And I was like, what are you doing? Like, why are you with these? Now this Cometco now is Ecobat. I was like, what are you guys doing? Why is City of Hope and all these health organizations at this place? Why are you here? You should guys be fighting these people. And that's kind of where I'm puzzled too. Like, how are they getting the support from these organizations when they know that this is what is out there? So I'm just kind of ranting at this point, but I saw this with my own eyes. I was like, I'm kind of confused. City of Hope? Isn't this cancer? Like, I don't know. I don't know.
Can't hear you. I think you're mute.
Yeah, I tried to unmute myself. It didn't work. So can you tell us, so there's two companies that you're talking about. One is in Lincoln Heights. The other is in Hacienda Heights, Avocado Heights, in that area. The one in Lincoln Heights used to be a battery company.
It's in
and
Vernon.
they
It's the city of Vernon. That's
yeah, but it seeped through the entire region, so it's like everything's contaminated.
Wow. So they had dumped lead underground. They somehow.
Yeah, like honestly, like if you read the reports, they would do stuff overnight with just not even doing any safety protocol, to the fact that even workers got sick, and even some workers also kind of, some of them did whistleblow. So it was just a mess because they were just doing whatever they wanted, pretty much. No consequences at that point. So just, and this has been going on since, like, 70s, 80s in some of these companies. So it's been generations of kids and people, who've gotten sick. And just, it's just horrible, because this is honestly like intentionally neglected. And this is what we call environmental racism for this issue, for this purpose, because we know that it's targeting people of color.
Yeah. So
Right.
this
It-
facility did a lot of recycling of the batteries and stuff, and it polluted the whole area, contaminated the whole thing. They went to court. People were fighting, to try to get them to clean up. They end up settling. Then they end up filing for bankruptcy. The judge actually approved their excise bankruptcy settlement, which pretty much put taxpayers to pay for the bill.
yeah, right.
And this
Yeah.
is where the judges also come in. We need to vote for these judges. Why are these people giving them a slap on the wrist?
Yeah.
I mean, it really comes down to every single part of our government that will allow these corporations to pretty much roll over and just let it go.
Right. Yeah, this is pretty common. It is not just lead pollution, groundwater pollution, or soil contamination, but also with abandoned wells, unplugged oil and gas wells. There's millions of them, or across around the United States, and these wells basically they get abandoned, and it's because they're abandoned, it's now the responsibility of the public to clean it up. The state has to clean that mess up. But there's not enough funding that goes towards doing that, plugging those wells. And some of those wells can be very expensive to plug. Some of them are cheaper, but there's some that go into the tens of thousands. And that has to be paid for out of the public's own resources, financial resources. And that is a common problem. These companies, they go bankrupt and they don't clean up their mess. In the case of the abandoned wells, there are laws that require these oil and gas companies to pay into a fund that is then supposed to be used to clean it, but they often don't put in enough. The requirements aren't high enough for that money to cover all of those wells. And so that's a similar problem, but that's something that has to be done. I think with any of these companies, there needs to be some way where they have to pay in, whether it's part of their bankruptcy. They should be required to sell off assets to fund the cleanup of their mess. It sounds like that didn't happen here, and it sounds like it's just not very common in general. The environment is regularly discounted, so that doesn't seem to end up in these court cases or as part of the bankruptcy deal, and then it just ends up being the local city that is now responsible, or the state is now responsible to clean up that mess, and it is very difficult to clean up any type of groundwater pollution. Yeah. I know a professor at Georgia Tech who does research in that, and in his class he talked about the challenges of cleaning up these plumes in groundwater, and it's horrible. You don't want to contaminate them. It can be very, very challenging and very costly.
Well, I think the problems that we have, and you see these, everybody see this. We have mega developers coming into our city here, developing everything. It's like they just, are popping all these new developments like popcorn. It's just like everywhere. They're just popping everywhere, and they don't, we don't have enough, studies done, and there's not enough, pushback, against all these irresponsible developers that just care about the bottom line, and they don't see the impact that they are having in our communities. It's massive impact that all these developers bring. You know, yeah, everybody wants to see a beautiful city. I like to see nice buildings and everything, but if it's going to be a detrimental, you know, for families, our communities, and put them at risk, health risk, you know, then we need to really stop and think what we are doing, because this is exactly what happens. This is exactly what turns out is that we are in a rush to allow these developers to do their thing. And this is why we are against Caruso, by the way. That guy is bad news. Again, we don't need more developers that are so irresponsible, that don't, you know, want to stop and think about the cost that they may harm to the communities. We need responsible developers. So right now, I've been advocating. People saying, what is one of the solutions to deal with the housing crisis and to deal with the homelessness crisis
Public housing.
and the environment? I said you need to put a freeze on all these developments. You need to put a freeze. They're talking about they're going to be building affordable housing for the year 2030. Well, let's put a freeze until the year 2030 of no more new developments. You know, and if they don't build it by 2030, it's 2040, 2050, no developments until then. That should put, you know, some kind of brakes on this stuff. But it's upsetting. It's a very upsetting, Jackie, when we are seeing these things affecting our communities, our children. You see that at the level where you work.
And I have to say, I mean, this all goes back to also even the EPA and the enforcement agencies for environmental health and for these, toxic pollution, because we see that the EPA just, got a swing at the organization, at the institution, sorry, basically saying that they can't really regulate some things on the federal level. So we're kind of seeing that when we talk about how are we also going to ensure that these issues are prevented or even addressed, we need environmental agencies to have the funding and to have the enforcement power to do it. Because if we don't, then it's just nothing's gonna really happen, because at the community level, people are fighting. But at the same time, people need that policy to back them up. People need those politicians that care about that to back them up. So I think especially here in LA, I see the communities fighting back. But they also find that, there's a limit to it without the policy and the politicians to care for their issues. So I think that is one of the issues that people need to pay attention to when voting for whoever it is that's running, because that's where a lot of the power is going to be at too, being able to organize, to show up, to protest, but also to have the politicians that's going to ensure that they have the resources and that environmental health has the funding to fight back and to prevent these issues from happening again, because I think that's kind of like the way that we're going to move ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's something that I think is important to also address about this. A lot of times companies will say they won't do X, Y, and Z because there's the environmental regulations are too much. They requires too much time. There's too much overhead. The studies take too long. It's too expensive. And I think in some cases this may actually be true because the corporations are always trying to reduce costs, right? So the main goal is always to maximize profit and to maximize that return on investment. Everything is about a return on investment in corporations and in these companies. And so there is this idea that is very backward, right? Because if you have to take more time to do something and it's going to cost you more, you're not going to do it, that invariably means that the environment is going to be at a loss, is going to lose, because you're going to want to push to deregulate on the environmental overhead, because it's going to take you too long to build what you want to build and meet these environmental standards. So I think that's why we see a lot of pressure from the private industry to try to deregulate, because the incentives in the economic system are upside down, right? They're to maximize that profit and do it in a short term, get that return in a short period of time as possible. So that's part of the economic problem, I think, that ends up driving these issues, and where they just say, like, screw it, I'm just going to dump this toxic waste because I don't want to deal with any of that. I just want to make as much money as possible. And that's part of the, like, I think the fundamental struggle, the fundamental problems in the existing system, because it rewards you in a way to just do bad things.
Well,
And I just want to add to that really quick, because what you're saying is totally what happens. And then second, they're kind of like, well, if it happens, well, then I'll just get away with it. And I mean, really, I mean, they always do. So they kind of take that gamble. And because everything is about risk for them, it's honestly just, they're going to take the risk. They're never going to really consider these precautions. But that's the reason why, you know, some of these things, I feel like, you know, then we take over, like and then we own them as a means of nationalizing them. Because if you can't take care of the issue, then we have to pretty much take care of that ourselves, ensure that that's going to be regulated the way it should. That's just, I mean, and I mean, with the housing issue, quite honestly, we need more housing, but we can't allow these corporations and developers to just do it wherever they want, just because they see a patch of land that costs less, maybe because it's contaminated, right?
Right.
But we do need more housing, but I feel like public housing is going to be kind of pretty much the way we're going to have to do this, because I can't trust developers to make the right choices, nor to ensure that the market is going to be regulated for people to actually afford it. They're going to be gouging this. And then with the water issue, I mean, connecting it with the climate issue, how are we? I don't know. I mean, I'm confused. I'm so confused.
And the other thing that is a problem in all of this, because we want the public, the community, to really decide what is best for them. Right? This is their community. This is where they live. They should be the one to decide what kind of housing is built in their community, what kind of housing is needed in their community. But the elected politicians are also getting a lot of money from the developers. And that is also why they're able to build in these areas, because they've already paid off the representatives that are supposed to be acting in the best interest of the community. And this is the other problem. Because yes, absolutely, let's have public funded housing. Let's have a public oversight on this stuff. But if our elected politicians are betraying the public, then this is not public housing, right? This is still corporate housing that is being designed in a way that benefits a certain group of people over the community. So this has to be fixed as well at the local level. If it's not fixed, then we are not going to get that good, solid housing that is needed in these communities. And you're not going to get around this pollution that ends up happening in the community like this. And that is a big struggle.
Yeah. Well, we know we have companies like PG&E that, was major cause of the fires here in California. And, they got protected by legislatures. They got protected. They, pretty much, were a reason for our fires and their irresponsibility in acting and so on and so forth. But again, this goes back for us to be able to be paying attention who's doing what, starting at the local level, and hold them accountable. And if people are running for office here as a city council or level or any kind of level, including some of your neighborhood councils, because some neighborhood councils are infestated by developers, friends of developers, that pretty much rubber stamp every single project that comes through their desk and through their voting. So it starts at the lowest levels and it goes all the way up. So we gotta be paying attention, people. We have to be paying attention, because all they're doing is trying to deregulate, trying to push the agenda, that promotes more development, more, of the same old things that are hurting our communities. So I actually was over at Echo Park today, and I took a little walk through Echo Park, and I am reminder of the elections that are coming in there. You have, your establishment person right there, councilman, um, that pretty much has allowed all this development here in District 13, and now you have a new candidate, Hugo, that has a chance of winning. He actually got more votes on the primary, so he's going against O'Farrell. And this is the kind of stuff that we need to be paying attention to, and getting behind these candidates that are very promising. Hugo he comes from a background of unions. He is a people's person, and he's an organizer, community organizer. We need people like him, and not somebody that's going to rubber stamp, all the developers and their projects. So again, we need to be paying attention. If there is something we can do, is pay attention and start supporting candidates that represent our views and the things that we care about.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we are at the top of the hour now, so we probably should wrap up. So, Jackie, Carlos, any final thoughts on anything that we've discussed today? Jackie, would you like to go first?
Fine.
Go ahead, Carlos. You first.
Okay, so there's so much that we talked about. We went from national news to some of the stuff that's coming down to the elections. Obviously the environment and so on and forth. I've been traveling up and down this different parts of the country, and I've been talking to people. Yesterday, I was over at a community over in Miami, which is called Little Haiti. It's a community. It is a very poor community, and it's being, changed by gentrification, and they don't care where they push these people out, and we have to be concerned about what's happening in our communities, and that's why we are here on this broadcast every Sunday. We want to be able to speak with you, and we're able to talk to some and invite some of our community leaders. I'm gonna see if we can work and see if we can bring Hugo to be our guest and see where he's at with his campaign. But there are others that are running for office. It is always important, as I travel from community to community, talking to people, is I remind them the same thing, and I'm learning that it's pretty much the same issues that we all are fighting against. Is we gotta get involved. You cannot afford to sit down, to take a break. I hate politics. I have always said that over and over. But I remind you that your landlord, he is into politics. Your insurance company is into politics. All those people, your car company, wherever you buy your car from, you know what I mean? They're into politics, and they push their agenda. So we got to get involved in politics and make sure that we are representing our children, our families, our abuelitas, abuelitos, whoever you love, we got to stand up for them, and we got to fight for them. Those are my thoughts.
Yeah.
Jackie.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, everything that you said, Carlos, definitely behind that, because at the end of the day, that's how we know the issues in our communities. We know how it is that they can get fixed. Now we just need policy and politicians to really get behind these. And quite honestly, a lot of grassroots organizations, they're doing a lot of the hefty work. They're showing up for their communities, and that's always what gives me hope. So I do want to give a shout out to East Yard Communities for Environmental Justice in East LA that, did shine light on the lead issue. That's kind of how I really became aware of that. Also, the Avocado Heights Vaqueros Vaqueras. Honestly, that's how I also learned about Conmeco, and I got more involved in that too. And in that same line with Quemeco, I do want to give a shout out to, again, when we talk about politics, to Regardle Martinez. He's running for La Puente City Council, and he's been involved with the Quemeco issue, and he's very concerned about that. So we need to pay attention to politicians locally like that, when we talk about, who it is that we're going to vote for. So I do want to just name them because when it comes to these issues, local grassroots, they're really involved. And USC, the environmental scientists, they have been doing a lot of local sampling for LA and the affected communities. And I think that's where a lot of these communities have had like a surveillance, their own surveillance system of like community accountability. And I'm really inspired by that. And that's kind of, let's bring on some people who, are going to talk about that, because I think here in LA, I get very inspired by all of these community organizations that are really doing a lot of the work and understand why their community is fighting back, and they're doing it amazingly. So I really am inspired every day by that.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Jackie, for being with us today. I think we had a really, really fantastic discussion. I personally learned a lot about some local in our backyard environmental injustice that I was not aware of, that this was happening. And it is very, very upsetting, because these are communities that don't deserve, well, no community deserves it, but these communities, they don't deserve to have all lead poisoning and housing being built on that. That's just really, really horrible, and something needs to be done to prevent that from happening again. So thank you for joining us, and I hope you'll be with us again next week, because it was a lot of fun having you on the show with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Well,
Yeah,
she's
it was,
one of us now. She's
yeah. Well, this was where, we were auditioning for Jackie, so I hope we
Yeah, honestly, this is fun. I really like talking about these issues and honestly bringing some solutions to the conversation.
That's great. Great. Yeah. All right. Well, we have to go. We've been at this for an hour and 6 minutes. So thank you, as always, to our viewers. Thank you for joining us on this Sunday night. We're here most Sundays at 7 p.m. Pacific time, 10 p.m. Eastern time. You've been watching Stand Up, Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. I'm your co-host, Margot Paez. This is your other co-host, Carlos Marroquin. And over there, this is our new co-host, Jackie Hernandez. So thank you. Thank you, everyone. We'll be back next week. Please be sure to share us with your friends. Hit the like button, hit subscribe button, hit the follow button. Tell everyone about us. We're here. We're talking about issues that other people are not talking about, and we're trying to get you pumped up to get involved and take back your community, because that's all really politics is. So take care. We'll see you again soon. Have a really great night. And where is my mouse? Oh, there it is. Have a great night and a really wonderful week. Stay safe.